This is The Wire for 2300 Zulu, December 12, 2025. Precedence is routine. Information cutoff is 2200. Bottom line up front. Bulgarian Prime Minister resigns amid mass protests and civil unrest. Wartime preparations continue in Caribbean. Multiple violent attacks reported around the United States. Beginning with international events, in the Caribbean, wartime preparations continue as before on all sides. The United States continues to bolster forces throughout the region, slowly increasing the military presence at U.S. installations on islands adjacent to Venezuela. Maduro's forces continue to fortify and harden defensive positions as best they can, which is mostly taking the form of defensive exercises and the widening of a slightly more organized civil defense effort to arm the populace to fight the United States in the event of invasion, analysts comment. A few days ago, one of Maduro's main political opponents, Maria Corina Machado, was smuggled out of the country secretly to attend to the ceremonies accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. This also has many side benefits. One of Maduro's opponents being thrust back into the international limelight by the United States is a necessary step in regime change. And also, having a prospective replacement for Maduro physically out of the country when the shooting starts is quite convenient. In the United Kingdom, a community Christmas tree was vandalized after the tree lighting ceremony in Shotton Colliery last night. Local authorities state that someone cut down the tree with a chainsaw a few hours after the annual tree lighting ceremony in the common area adjacent to St. Saviour's Anglican Church. Analysts comment. The assailants have not been caught, however locals have a list of suspects in mind, as the same youths were observed throwing objects at passing cars in the same general area over the past few days. The tree itself is also not a temporary tree brought in for the holidays. It's actually a World War I memorial that was planted years ago and is typically decorated for the holiday season. In Bulgaria, yesterday evening, the government collapsed as Prime Minister Zheleznikov resigned after months of protests. Last night, a vote of no confidence was scheduled to be held in Parliament, which also triggered widespread protests in the streets. However, a few minutes before the vote, the Prime Minister resigned. Analysts comment. This effectively makes Bulgaria the latest government to fall to the Zoomer uprising, a global trend of mostly younger citizens uprooting the old guard from the seats of power. Where things head for Bulgaria right now is anyone's guess, but considering that Bulgaria is constantly labeled as the most corrupt nation in the EU, often by a wide margin, there will certainly be a lot of incentive to make radical changes over the next few months. On the home front, in Georgia, last night a chemical attack was reported in Savannah, wounding one woman who was walking on the sidewalk near Forsyth Park last night. Ashley Wesolowski suffered third-degree burns when a man approached her from behind and poured an unidentified chemical on her. The suspect remains unknown and at large. Authorities have provided an extremely low-resolution photo of the suspect, a black male who was last seen in the vicinity of the attack site. No further details have been provided on the attacker. In New York, yesterday a stabbing was reported at Macy's in Herald Square, which involved a woman being attacked in a changing room by a random assailant. The woman was attending to her infant in the restroom on the 7th floor of the store when the attacker, who was also in the restroom at the time, stabbed her multiple times. The victim's husband, who was waiting outside, entered the restroom and reports vary regarding what happened next. Some sources claim the husband detained the assailant until authorities arrived, whereas other sources claim the attacker egressed from the area before being arrested sometime later. The victim remains hospitalized as a result of the attack, but is expected to survive. Analyst comments for this wire. The New York incident is an odd case, as stabbing attacks are not usually conducted by women targeting other women, and when these attacks do occur, it's usually never a random outburst of violence. The assailant has been identified as Carrie Airney of Tewksbury, Massachusetts. No mugshot has been posted yet, however a social media page on Facebook can be found that possibly matches the suspect, although the page is largely blank and doesn't offer up any clue as to why this brutal attack was carried out. Both the victim and her husband work for the Jurupa Valley Sheriff's Office in California and were tourists visiting the city for the holidays, so there's not really much to go on regarding why this lady conducted this attack. Regardless, clearly local authorities thought the attack was serious enough to result in attempted murder charges being filed, along with assault and the possession of a deadly weapon. This concludes The Wire for 2300 Zulu, December 12, 2025.